Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a Prank Kids deck profile. So I'm really excited for this one because this deck is a very interesting deck that basically focuses around fusion and link summoning into some really amazing cards. This deck has had a really good competitive track record, being able to be a rogue tier 2, even a tier 1 deck at certain points, which is really amazing. This deck is actually doing really good in the meta right now, which I'm really not surprised about because this deck is actually super consistent because essentially all of your monsters in the main deck float into one another, which is fantastic. So without further ado, guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your name description in a single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands. So without further ado, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be laying 3 copies of Prank Kids Roxy's. So Prank Kids Roxy's has the ability that basically, it has the ability that if this card is sent to the graveyard as a material for a fusion or link summon of a Prank Kids monster, then you get a particular effect. All of your Prank Kids monsters share that particular ability that if they're used as a fusion or link summon material, then you get an effect, and then you get to special summon another Prank Kids monster except another copy of themselves from the hand or the deck. So Roxy's particular unique effect is that you can banish 1 card from your hand, and if you do, you get to draw a card. Whereas Lampsy's burns your opponent for 500, which is fantastic. Your copy of Dropsies lets you gain 1,000 life points, and your copy of Fancies has the ability to Foolish Burial another Prank Kids card, which is really good just to be able to have all those different unique effects. They all have a really good place in this deck because they do share that ability that if they're sent to the graveyard as a material for a fusion or link summon of another Prank Kids monster, then you get a unique effect, and then you can special summon another Prank Kids monster from the deck or hand with a different name from the one you just used, which is really cool because all you have to basically do is keep up with which ones of the 4 you've already used for the turn, and you can special summon accordingly, which is pretty good. You can actually get all 4 effects off in the same turn, which is really good to gain 1,000, burn for 500, Foolish Burial, and banish and draw, which is really good about this deck. We then play for the hand traps and other tech monsters. We're going to be playing a single copy of Dino Wrestler Prankatops. Prankatops is really good because if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can kind of Cyber Dragon this card to your side of the field, which is really good. And also it has the ability that you can quick effect attribute a Dino Wrestler monster, target a card your opponent controls, and destroy it. But this is the only Dino Wrestler you play in the entire deck. So basically, this is the only card you're ever going to tribute for this effect. We then play 3 copies of Nibiru. Nibiru is fantastic in this deck, and we got to follow up the dinosaur with, the meteor that took them out. But this card is really good because during the main phase, if your opponent normal or special summons 5 or more times, then basically you tribute as many face-up monsters on the field as possible. If you do, special summon this card from your hand, and then special summon a Primal Being token, rock level 11, question mark attack, question mark defense to your opponent's field with the sum of the attack of all the monsters tributed for this card's effect, and you give yourself the Nibiru, which is pretty good. We then play 3 copies of Droll Knockbird. This card is really good at stopping your opponent from adding cards from deck to hand. Once they add the first time, you just discard this card to the graveyard, and they can't do it for the rest of the turn, which is fantastic in this deck. And then we play 3 copies of Ash to round out the monsters, because Ash is the best hand trap in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So you just discard this card from your hand to be able to basically stop your opponent from touching the deck, which is really good because it just stops your opponent from adding cards from deck to hand, special summoning from the deck, or sending cards from deck to graveyard, which is fantastic in a deck like this. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing a single copy of Monster Reborn. Monster Reborn is really good in this deck as a great extender because basically what this card is going to do is bring back any of your Link monsters to your side of the field, Fusion monsters, or any of your Prank Kids monsters to be able to go into some more plays. Play a single copy of Harpy's Feather Duster because you just don't like back row in this deck, and this card is fantastic to be able to take out back row. 1 copy of Called by the Grave because Called by the Grave is just really good at stopping your opponent's hand traps because you don't want to get a hand trap, but you want to hand trap your opponent. We then play a single copy of Terraforming because it does search the searcher that you need in this particular deck, which is the place, Prank Kids Place, which is the field spell. So this card comes in ridiculously handy. We play a single copy of Pranks. Pranks has the ability that's basically a foolish, or not foolish, but it lets you discard a Prank Kids to special summon a token, and then it's a Pot of Avarice that lets you target 3 Prank Kids cards in your graveyard and then shuffle them into the deck, which is a very good effect just to be able to get those additional cards back into the deck. We then play a single copy of Thunder Dragon Fusion. Thunder Dragon Fusion comes up so handy in this deck because Thunder Dragon Fusion is basically like Miracle Fusion because you get to fusion summon a Thunder Fusion monster from your extra deck by shuffling the fusion materials listed on it from your deck or from cards in your field and graveyard or face them from your managed pile. And then during your main phase, instead of the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you manage this card to add a Thunder monster from your deck to your hand, which you do actually play Fancies, which is a Thunder monster, which is pretty cool. We then play 3 copies of Pandemonium. Pandemonium is fantastic as well because Pandemonium lets you basically fusion summon during your opponent's turn because it has the ability that during your main phase you can fusion summon a Prank Kids monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material, and for the rest of the turn after this card resolves, you cannot normal summon or special summon except for Prank Kids, which is fine because all you're ever going to summon is Prank Kids anyways, so that is totally fine by me because you're only ever going to summon them in this deck at all. We then play 3 copies of Prank Kids Place. Prank Kids Place is fine in this deck as well. It's probably one of the best field spells in the entire game because what this card does is it lets you search the deck for another Prank Kids card, which is really, really good. And it also has the ability that when you fusion summon, you reduce the opponent's monster's attack, or you gain 500, but when you link summon, you reduce the opponent's monster's attack by 500. I always get those 2 effects mixed up, which is really cool to actually do because basically you're putting a gap between yours and your opponent's monsters of 1,000, which is really, really good. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. One thing I will mention about Pandemonium is it is quick play, so you can fusion summon during your opponent's turn, which is just really, really good to be able to go into something like a Battle Butler during your opponent's turn, which basically is a walking Raigeki. So that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, and we're going to be playing 3 copies of Solemn Strike. So Solemn Strike and Infinite Impermanence just basically say no to every single monster that your opponent might have because the copies of the Infinite Impermanence is going to stop monster effects, and then the copy of Solemn Strike is going to stop your opponent from activating cards like monster effects and then special summoning monsters. So basically these cards are very good in this deck just to be able to stop unique effects that your opponent might be throwing off, especially if you're going second in this build. The copies of Impermanence come in really handy, and then the Solemn Strikes kind of prevent your opponent from doing anything later in the game, which is really cool. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Prank Kids Mew Mew. Mew Mew is fantastic because it's the best Link 1 in probably in the entire, well, it actually is the best Link 1 in the entire deck, but it's going to be the main starter of the entire deck because you're going to be able to use this card to be able to go off with all of your other Prank Kids monsters effects. It has the ability that you can link some of this card using any Prank Kids card that's level 4 or lower, and if a Prank Kids monster you control would be tributed or tribute itself to activate its effect during your opponent's turn, you can manage this card from the graveyard instead. So you're always going to link summon into this first, then use the effects of a Prank Kids to special summon a different Prank Kids from the deck, and then link this and the other Prank Kids card away to be able to go into another monster that's a link to, or fusion summon. We then play a single copy of Bow Wow Bark. Bow Wow Bark is kind of neat because it has the ability that a Prank Kids monster, this card points to, gains 1,000 attack, and then during your opponent's turn, quick effect, you can tribute this card, target 2 Prank Kids cards with different names in your grave, and then add those targets back to your hand, which is pretty good. And it also has the ability that Prank Kids monsters you control cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects this turn at all, which is really, really good. And then we play 2 copies of Doo Doo Doodle Doo. Doo Doo Doodle Doo is just, to me, a 2 of. I probably wouldn't play Doodle Doo at any more than 2. It's a good, can be a good 3 of, but the extra deck is kind of tight, so I just play it as a 2 of. If this card is link summon, you get to add a Prank Kids spell or trap from your deck to your hand, which is usually like Pandemonium or Place that you're usually searching in this deck. And then it has the ability also that you can tribute this card and then target 2 Prank Kids cards with different names in your graveyard, and then add those targets back to your hand as well, which is pretty good just to be able to grab those cards and add them back to your hand. But being a spell and trap searcher is just fantastic in this deck. We then play a single copy of Rip Roar and Roaster. Rip Roar and Roaster is really good too because if this card, or there must be a link summon in the quick effect, you contribute this card, destroy all spells and traps your opponent controls. And if this card you're in your possession is sent to the graveyard by your opponent's card, then you get to target, or if this card in your possession is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card, you can target 1 card in your graveyard except a link monster and add it back to your hand, which is really fantastic. We then play the same copy of Appaloosa because it gives us additional negations, a single copy of Access Code Talker because it also pops additional cards on the field, 1 copy of Unicorn to spin stuff, Phoenix to pop spells and traps, and then for the fusions, we're playing a single copy of Battle Butler. I just think 1 Battle Butler is fine. I've gone between 1 and 2 in different builds, and I really think that 1 is fine. I usually don't summon the second one. There is options to summon the second one, but I don't ever find myself going into it unless I'm really pushed. And if I get pushed really hard in this deck, usually I just go for something like an access code instead anyways. But it must be fusion summoned. In quick effect, you contribute this card to destroy all monsters your opponent controls, and if this card in your possession is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card, then you get to target one non-fusion card in your graveyard and special summon it, which is pretty good just to be able to special summon a monster to your side of the field. We then play just a single Rocket Ride. Rocket Ride is also good in this deck because if this card is fusion summoned, you can make this card lose 1,000 attack and attack your opponent directly. You contribute it to target 2 Parankids non-fusion monsters with different names in the grave, and immediately special summon them back to your side of the field, but they can't attack this turn. And we play the same copy of Weather Washer. Weather Washer has the ability, if a Parankids card attacks, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step, and then during your opponent's turn, quick effect, you contribute this card to target 2 Parankids fusion monster, 2 non-Parankids fusion monsters with different names in your graveyard and special summon them, so you just can't target the other fusion monsters. And then we play a single copy of Totally Awesome. The Weather Washer special summons them just like the Rocket Ride, which is really good. And then I play a single copy of Totally Awesome, because Totally Awesome is actually really awesome in this deck because you have the copies of the Dropsies that basically count as Aqua monsters that you can get on your side of the field really easy as level 2s, and then you can go into a copy of Toad just to give you additional negations. I love the Toad in this deck, and it's really, really fun to be able to play, and it's actually totally awesome. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you enjoy it. It's a really fun deck to be able to play around with. I highly recommend that you guys give Parankids a try. It's a really fun deck to be able to play around with. It's a little bit on the expensive side with your Parankids places going for like, I believe like 25 at the time of recording. I don't know how much they are now, but the main deck besides the copies of place are really cheap. Doo-Doo Doodle Doos are a little bit expensive and the places are a little bit expensive, but everything else is very cheap in the deck, which is really nice. And basically you can just throw in a bunch of staples. They don't have to just be those hand traps. They can be other traps that you want to play and stuff like that if you want to make the deck a little bit more budget. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like getting your names through every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile. And we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.